Hello. Holy cow, talk about last minute. How's everybody doing? Hopefully we have some people jump in. Guys and girls, I am dead, man. Mentally exhausted. It's been non-stop phone calls today. Couldn't even have time to put together a proper program. So we're winging it a little bit. Not much, but a little. Let's see here. How's everybody doing? Hey, Roger, Kevin. Thanks for popping in with me. Hopefully everything goes well and people start coming in. But I didn't really get a chance to throw out any kind of advertising for tonight's class. It kind of got bombarded today with a bunch of calls and things. So what I wanted to talk about is, from time to time, you guys and girls email me with questions. It might be, simply because you watch the class after, it wasn't live and all, you just watched it when you had a chance, and so you had a question regarding it or just a question in general, and I get a lot of emails with those questions and stuff, and I thought, you know what, since I didn't have really a lot of time to prepare anything, I thought I would answer a question that was an email that was just recently written to me, and at the same time see if we can come up with a pretty cool project out of it. It might not be a project that I would be able to carve because my machine's not quite big enough, but who knows, there might be some tiling options or something like that. We'll talk about it here in just a second. We're getting a late start. It's way past 7:15, but people are starting to rock and roll in. Thanks for popping in. We appreciate you. All that good stuff and everything. But as I said, recently I had a customer, or a viewer, not really a customer, a viewer, shoot me an email, and Tomas, let's see what we can do here. Tomas Zaba. I hope I did not butcher that last name too badly. Tomas. But Tomas asked me, said, hey, I just started watching your videos in the last few months. Yeah. I like it very well. I'm going to send you a video, and can you tell me, do you have any idea how they do this type of work? Maybe this would make a good training video and something and all. And what the video was is, let me see if I can pull up. Let's get over to the other screen here, and let's see if I can, what screen is that? That is going to be screen number 3. There we go. And let's get me down. What do I want to be? I want to be down here for right now. And so Tomas asked me, he said, hey, I'm just watching your videos. I like them. I'm going to send you a video link, and can you tell me how they do this type of work? Right? And basically, it's a headboard design, right? It's just a very ornate design where the company, Think Media, is creating this ornate carving. Okay? And it goes on and on and on. And when all's said and done, at the very end of it, I don't even know if they show the final result. They might. Hold on, let's see here. Yeah. So at the very end of it, they have, you know, this kind of ornate headboard, if you will, right? And so Tomas asked, his question was basically, do you have any idea how they do this type of work? Any suggestion on that? Right? That was kind of his statement. And basically, in here, it's a form of when they're carving and everything. If we look at if we go back to the very beginning, let's see here. They are using, I don't know if it'll show the bit very well, but they're using a bit of a, almost kind of like a beading bit, if you will. It's a round over bit. It's got a sharp point on it. It creates that V cut, and then it rounds over into a round over. This is what, when it carves, it's what allows them to create these beads, if you will. So as they're going around cutting those circles. So the bit is basically, it's doing a V carving, if you will, but it's also rounding over the outside edges and everything. And so on their circles, their little circle drawings and stuff like that, when they're creating, that's how I create those little beads and stuff, right? And so Tomas, if you watch this, basically that's how they created that. It's technically, it's called a beading bit. Let's see if I can, beading router bit. And let's go to images. Excuse me. And, you know, Amana 56-127 is a good choice here, but this is a 3/8 inch pointed point, cutting round over bit. So it's a round over bit with a almost kind of like a V point cut. This one happens to have a little bit of a flat depth in it. It doesn't come straight to a straight point, but same thing. So it could be different radiuses and what have you. Now, what radius they happen to be using in the video, unfortunately, I don't know. And let's see here. If we went back here, I'm sure that they have a variety of sizes and all, depending on what the bed is and what have you. But this particular pattern in itself it's a simple V-carve type pattern. But when the bit is cutting kind of on the line, if you will, it's creating the round over on both sides, and especially when it's going around the profile of the circles and everything, that round over bit is kind of creating those little beads, which looks like just a string of pearls, if you will. So the patterns, I'm going to just import an image really quickly. And let's zoom into it. So the patterns, this is just a generic, this isn't, that particular image, just a generic kind of layout. But in a sense, it could be much more ornate than this, or what have you. And they're running that beading bit. That beading bit is literally doing a profile cut. It's following the line and it's creating that round over design. So Thomas, that's pretty much how that's being created. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to venture away from that, maybe make kind of like a headboard or the back of a chair or something like that. Speaking of that, I owe somebody a chair seat. Remind me, I got to send that off to someone. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to bring in an image and we'll do a tracing, and it's going to be kind of one of those repeatable patterns that you can put side by side. We're going to clean it up and see if I can come up with a kind of a headboard pattern that might fit and everything. This one is just kind of a generic little, I just wanted to show, because it had that same kind of body style as you know, this particular shape here, right? You know, and this was Think Media, you know, and that's what it was, Tomas. So thanks for your question, but really it's just a beading bit and a profile cut, you know, on a design, and then they end up cutting it out. So it's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and see what we can come up with. And for this, let's go into our job setup here, and I'm going to go, you know, pretty good size on this. Like I said, it's not a design that I would be able to cut because my machine is not big enough for the height that I would want. I can only have a 24-inch maximum, and unless I tiled it together, but that particular board, it wouldn't look good as a glued up panel, if you will. So I'm going to go with we're going to reduce it down to a general size. Maybe it'll be the headboard for my dog bed or something. In this case, I'm going to go 36 inches, which would be much bigger if it was a regular headboard. But I'm going to go my maximum, which is 24 inches here. And I'm going to go 1.5 inches thick on the size. For this, I will be starting at the bottom left corner. And I will be touching off on the material surface. Okay. I'll have a wasteboard that will be, if I do cut the part out and everything, make sure you have a wasteboard on your table. Okay. Now, I've got 3 different kind of designs here, and I just wanted to kind of give Tomas a bit of a kind of a quick and dirty rundown before we get into our design. And essentially, these guys, whether they have purchased the pattern on Amazon or someone drew it up, right? Because there's a lot of artists out there and everything. They've essentially got a very ornate looking design. Okay, and this one I'll just kind of use this lotus flower here. And let's center that. I'm going to hit Group G for grouping things together, and I'm going to group that together. Okay, and essentially they've got this beading bit, which I believe, let me see what size beading bit I have in my tool database. I don't have a lot of those, but let's see what I've got. I've got a 1/4 inch, 3/8. That's a little bit too wide. So my 1/4 inch is the 1/4 inch I have is kind of like a beading bit. So I could do something a little bit on the smaller side, 1/4 inch radius on that. So that's fine. We'll use that as an example. Let's take this and delete. So I have 2 questions that I want to go over. So this one's the first one. Delete this. And basically, delete all. Come on now. Delete all. And so they took that design and they ran a profile toolpath with that beading bit. I'm not sure what depth they might have cut to. For me, since I'm using a 1/4 inch radius, I'm going to go a 1/4 inch deep. Okay. I want to go to the very top of that roundover. I don't want to go to any much more deeper than that. And let's grab that bit. And I want to go on the line. We're going to cut on the line. Now, they, for the most part, let's turn this into a light piece of wood that everybody can see. Maple. There we go. And we'll preview that. So for the most part, depending on the design, they made sure it was a design that can be profile cut on the line. You know, maybe I need to go on the outside of the line or what have you. Let's take a look at my beads. So yeah, my design's got some small areas on there. Let's go on the outside of the line. And see what we get out of that. And everything. But it's almost not really prism cutting because of the round over and everything, but it's just the design has enough spread and space on it that whatever size, that was a pretty decent size bit they were using and all. Whatever size bit they were working with. Let me see what I did wrong here. Okay, it's not going to create the toolpath where it can't fit. So it's not going to let me do that. I do have to do on the line. I have to cut on the line. So we have to deal with that. But essentially, that bit, when it cuts on the line, let me go into solid view here. What's important is that, and this bit might be way too big for this design, but what's important is, and of course this is on a grand scale, I mean, they're going 72 inches or whatever a headboard is. I don't know what a headboard is. I'm making shit up now. Whatever size a headboard is, you know, but when the bit is cutting around there, we need to make sure that the center of that bit kind of, you know, meets at a certain place. It doesn't overlap too much. And in the case of those beads, you know, it was almost the right size bit that when it cut those beads out to create that pearl type essence, that it created that round almost ball. So the radius as it comes around that circle and everything, that it created almost that nice size ball. And I'm sure they were different sizes and things, but it did, through that whole design, I didn't see one tool change. So the whole design was cut with that one bead, Thomas. Thanks, Brooks. That's the digital woodcarver tool library. Most all digital woodcarver owners have a library. It's just a bunch of either bits that they would have in their bit sets or recommended bit sets. But the just really depends on, you know, my design. This design is quite small for that project. Now, if I maximize this out, let's see if we can go bigger. Let's go bigger, because I really can't make my bit small. Do I have, hold on, I might have a smaller bead bit. I might be an idiot and thinking incorrectly. Let me look at my tools here. Let me see. I know I have a... Okay, so let's see, quarter inch, that's the only bit that I have. That's the 56-123. So on my design, if we look at that 3D view cut again, it's not ideal. You know, that bit, the design's too small for a little bit too ornate. So some of the stuff's got to go. You know, we got to get rid of it. But what the whole goal is, let's zoom into the bottom of this, is number one, we don't have any of this crap here. You know, that's just where the bit was just way too big. What we want, what's ideal, is where we have this look, where when the bit is carving, we have that nice round over on both sides of the carve. to create that kind of that nice look. And then when we do the bead type cuts, that we have a nice circular cut, and it's not so mashed up. My bit being a 1/4 inch, it's got an overall size of a 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch radius. Little bit, my design is a little bit too tight, too small for that, so it's not gonna do right. So Tomas, when you are drawing with that, make sure that it's big enough. Now, if we were to V-carve this with a regular V-bit, right? Let's get rid of this and calculate. Probably should use a flat area clearance tool in there as well. We'll get from there. So for those of you that are just popping in, because I had no time to advertise or put anything out ahead of time and all today, basically have a couple of people that sent me some emails. Every once in a while, you guys and girls send me emails. And I thought, you know, since I didn't have time, I mean, I'm mentally drained tonight. I had so many calls back to back with just everything and anything with customers. And so I thought, man, I don't have a whole lot of time to put something together. So I thought, well, why not just answer a couple of these emails? Now, the second email is a little bit easier to answer, and I'm going to enjoy showing you that one. This one, Tomas sent me a video and said, hey, what are they doing here? How do they do this? They've got a design or pattern, Tomas, whether they drew it up themselves or, you know, you can buy these patterns on eBay, Etsy, things like that. You can go and you can type in the search Ornate headboard pattern, design patterns, and there's a ton of them there. Whether or not those people, you know, created that, they have a round over bit with a V, a beading bit, if you will, following the line, cutting out the cut. Now, if we were to come in and carve this as a V-carve or something, you know, with a V-bit, not a bad looking pattern in itself, but it's not this is not the appropriate pattern or appropriate design for that round over beading bit. It's got your lines, again, last time I'll say this is the radius of that bead, 1/4 inch radius, my line spacing needs to be at least probably a 1/2 inch spacing, quarter, and that's our radius and all, so that when it follows, you either have a flat at the top because the lines are a little wider, or if it's one of those circles that the bead meets and it makes that perfect circle cut. That way, when that bit comes around and cuts, you know, both halves of those circles and everything cleaning out, that you see in, let's back up right here. If we watch this here, as that bit comes, as it comes around and cuts, it's creating that pearl, that string of pearls, if you will, and everything. So that beading bit is just cutting that line, and by the time it's done, it's creating this string of pearls, right? And so we need to make sure that our bit and our vector kind of correspond, that half of that bit, or that radius of that bit, goes over half that circle, that vector. So when it comes around and cuts, it creates that nice round ball, you know? Right. So, all right. What I'd like to do is I've got a pattern here. Let's get rid of this lotus flower. Here, let me not delete it. Let me just move it off the screen. Move this one as well. I've got an ornate pattern here that is basically, it's a tile design. I don't want to use the whole thing. I just want to use parts of it. But it's one of those designs that when you trace it, you should be able to put the ends together. Let me get this sized up here. just a little bit. And if I were to hold down the control key for a copy and drag this over and snap it into place, that when the ends come together, that it creates a pattern. It's a continuous running pattern type of thing. Now, what I'd like to do is I want to basically take this center part out of this image, but I would like two of these patterns here as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically kind of put this together and do some trimming. Now, if I look at this pattern, let's first of all, I'm going to hold down my shift key, select both of these, and I'm going to use the alignment tool to align them up and down with one another, okay, so that they're even. And if I were to put them edge to edge, let's see here. If I were to put them edge to edge, I have on my little seam on these shapes and everything where they don't quite come together, right? And because of the way the tracing is, you know, it's not quite ideally perfect and stuff. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of create my own by just bringing this over to where there is just a slight amount of overlap in some instance. And then I'm going to just create new lines by trimming away what's there and then kind of recreating the shape. And if I have to go in and do some node editing to clean it up, I'm going to clean it up. But I want to basically kind of... I'm going to work down here at this bottom side. I don't want the top stuff, so I'm going to just kind of ignore that top stuff. But here, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my two images and ungroup them together. Ungroup them, not together. Apart. Ungroup. Okay. This way I can work on them. And somebody was asking me about this today. That's why I'm doing this. About creating background patterns and stuff. I'm kind of combining the two. I want to make almost like a headboard, but with this design. Now, here I'm going to take, and I have two choices in this matter. Number one is I could try to weld the part together to see what I end up with. But by doing that, I end up with kind of this funky little V up here at the top and the bottom not too clean. Okay, so welding I'm not going to have as an option. Number two, I could take my scissors and assume that I could, you know, just trim away what I don't want and keep what I do. So the top part of this with the trim is good. Bottom part needs a little love, right? So I would probably go through and do all my trimming first and then come back and do all my node editing. That way I'm not switching back and forth from one tool to another, because it just gets, it could get confusing and I could miss a step, right? And I could miss something and all by going back and forth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go through and I'm working on just the lower section. So I'm not worrying about this top stuff up here, just this lower section here. So starting with this one, but I'm just going to work my way down with my scissors, and I'm going to get rid of what I think should create my new line, you know, get rid of what the other line was and just create the new one here. And, you know, at the bottom, this design here, I'm going to go ahead and just, you know, get rid of the line, but we're going to come back with node editing and fix this up, right? So it's okay that it's a little janky right now, because I know that I have more work to do as we go. So continuing on, we're going to trim this, come down here and get rid of this excess out here. That'll create this new line, which I'm okay with that one. Moving on here and here. This I'm not happy with. So we're going to clean that up some, probably make it a little bit more even on both sides, but just kind of work our way down and go with what we've got so far. And got to zoom in. There's a little bit of a lap there. I'm not going to try to trim that. I'm just going to close the tool for a minute, and that should pull those two ends together. Let's open that tool back up. Okay. And as we come down here, we're going to just, here I could probably, there's not a whole lot going on here, so I could actually, on these two, I could weld those together, right? And I'll just have to come back and clean that up there. These two, if I weld them together, I'm going to get this little funky V out here, so I'll just take my scissors and just trim the few lines that I need to trim, right? All right, and might as well do it here while I'm here. When I close the tool, these two lines right here will come together at the end, so I'm not worried about them right now. Let's come down here, trim this, and get rid of those two inner lines. And that'll be that. So that's done. Now that I'm done with the scissor tool, now I can go back and decide to clean up whatever I want to clean up. And I'll go into node editing mode. And at this point, I'll decide, what it is that I want to clean up and what's fine for me. And then I'll talk to you about line smoothing, kind of smooth out some of the curves a little bit as well too. But I do want to come up here and in this line, I do want to get rid of this node right here. Just kind of smooth that out some. And up here, same thing. I want to get rid of this and smooth that out. Now, this one's a little bit janky because there's kind of a hitch right here as it moves into that. So I'm actually going to delete this point, and I'm going to just grab this node here and pull this back down to create kind of that smooth curvature there and everything. On this one here, I'm going to get rid of this point. And again, I'll pull this out somewhat. And I'll take this node and actually drag it to the center and fix this to kind of almost even it out. If I really want to even it out, I could just come in and hit the letter Y to pull that line straight, and that would, pretty much even that out for me. Up here, I want, it's almost kind of a heart shaped and all, but I really don't want that. I want to get rid of this little peak here, these 2 points. And here, I'm going to end up cleaning up one side and just flip it over to the other so I don't have to sit there and deal with too much. So I'm just going to cut it here and here. Get rid of, delete that left side. Over here, clean this up just a little bit. Get a little bit more smooth. I am happy with that, I think. Yeah, for the most part, I'm happy with that. So let's take and just make sure we have a mirror copy created and just flip to the left. And let's see. Yep. Now, down here at the bottom, very simple. I'm going to use a I'm going to use my extend tool and just extend this to there to close that off. And then I'm going to make sure that that shape, just because I closed it off, it doesn't mean it's joined. So I need to go over and join those two vectors together to close that off. It's not the smoothest of hearts or anything like that, but at least it's level. I'm happy with down here and up there on that one. This one I just want to get rid of that little hitch. And I'm just going to delete those 2 points and straighten that out. And I'm good with that. And then the last one is up here. I want to actually round this off a little bit. So I'm going to make that a Bezier curve so I can kind of pull this down. I'm going to get rid of this point. And this one too. Let me zoom in there. Come on. All right, zoom in further, further, further. Let's pull that out of there. There we go. Delete that point also. And so what I want is I want to pull this down. And I'd like these 2 points to be about the same height as well as these two. So I'm going to take this and this, and I'm just going to hit the letter Y to pull that up. It looks weird. Don't worry. That's because when I selected this, my red nodes were red over here. I need to turn them off. Turn that off. And this. And when I hit the letter Y, I just want to pull that up. Okay. Down here, this and this, I'm going to hit the letter Y. I want to even those out. All right. And then I want to take this one. And that as well. I'm going to use my right arrow key and just kind of pull that over. Not done with it yet. And let's go back this way. And I want to pull this. I'm going to use just this. I'm going to pull it to the left. Straighten that out a little bit there. Okay. So I just want to kind of straighten that out and, create that pattern. So I've got these two nodes even across and closed in to kind of narrow that up, just to create that nice straight line so it doesn't look so funky and everything, right? So, all right. So now that I have this pattern down here as one, I'm going to get rid of everything else so that I don't want. Let's get out of node editing mode. And do my best to just kind of clean up what I don't want, what I do want, and everything, and all that happy jazz. So I don't want any of this stuff. So I'm just drawing my mouse from right to left. That way anything my line touches, it'll select. And I'm just being, cautious of what the line touches. Okay. Here, this pattern here, I'm going to get rid of. And this pattern over here. Okay. And I'm keeping these three items here. Now, with this, I can, now that I have a bit of, I guess the word would be symmetry, right? With a bit of the word symmetry and all, symmetry, yeah. now that I have a little bit of symmetry and all, I could create a continuous pattern based on my, the spacing of this to make sure we get a nice fit and all. I could come in and decide if there's something I want to eliminate to whatever shape. In this case, I'm going to take, let's see here. Let's get this centered. Align left to right. And somebody was asking, let's see here, John said, wait, where'd it go? Troy asked, oh wait, Troy, did you get rid of your message? Okay. Why not just flip it so the right side meets the right side? The vectors would line up better, I would think, if that makes sense. Now, what he's referring to is, let me get that raw image back in here. What he's referring to is on the assumption that this image, when it was created, that it was created as a seamless pattern, right? They nailed it, as a seamless pattern, that if it was traced, and in this case, we'll go 75, pull this up, pull this down, preview, apply, and close. It would also assume that the tracing, this isn't a vector that someone spent a lot of time with. It's an image of a vector, right? It's not a tracing, so we're tracing it. So it's assuming that the tracing was damn dead on perfect, right? Just dead nuts perfect. And if it was dead nuts perfect, then everything would meet up. Now, what his question was is, okay, hey, what if I took and mirrored this? Let's hold the control key down and do that. If I take and flip one of these, so right side meets right side, right? So I'll do this one. I'm just going to hit the letter H on the keyboard to flip that horizontally and everything. And I am going to make sure I'm going to line up and down to make sure everything lines up. He's saying, wouldn't we be able to just take the right side of the panel and right side of the panel? And again, let's get everything lined up and down. And would they meet perfectly? So I'm going to come out to the right side and let's go to the right inside. Oops, wrong direction. Hold on a minute. This one. And by doing that, I end up with this gap, right? So right side to right side, I end up with this gap. So it's not quite perfect. Could be from the trace. It could be from what have you. But nevertheless, I could, it's pretty damn close, right? I could go into node editing mode. Let's ungroup this. I could go into node editing mode and I could delete a span here and here. And I could, close this off with a extend tool. I could extend this over to here and to close that off. Let's see which one's going to and then I could do the same thing up here. I could bring the two ends together as well too. I could do that also. But in this case, you know, I could extend this over to here, right, to get that V. And I could do, you know, get it somewhat close. But in order for this to be, I mean, ideally perfect right side to right side, that kind of thing, Troy, I mean, it would have to assume that your trace was absolutely perfect, right? And 99% of the time, your trace isn't going to be perfect. It's going to be slightly, you know, because of the pixelation or the size of the image and the quality and this and that, it's not going to be perfect or ideal. So there is going to be some cleanup required, right? So hopefully that makes some sense to you. But, you know, by flipping it right side to right side, we are at least bringing, all right, if I trace this one way and this, you know, I flip it and it's the same, could, you know, pretty much probably be close enough. Let me close this tool. I could probably be close enough that if I brought, you know, two things together, that when I clean them up or trim them and everything, it's not going to be that bad of a trimming, you know, or something. I don't know. Who knows? Hell, I could even take and overlap and then, you know, trim away and really, you know, have that clean, you know, just get everything over to where I get a real good sense of the bottom, whatever the case may be. But you'd have there, I mean, in order for this would have to be a vector that someone has created. You're importing it as a vector to where there's no tracing. You're importing it as a vector, and they've created it as a seamless pattern, a vectored seamless pattern that you could just bring over and just copy, make that array copy and everything. You know, it would have to be just mathematically perfect. That's what a vector is. It's a mathematically perfect design. An image being traced is not mathematically perfect. It's a bitmap being traced into a, turned into a vector, but those vectors are going to be, they need a little bit of cleanup, right? So that's kind of the issue we fall into. Okay. All right. So let's get rid of that. And let's come back over here. Now, in a sense, I have a pattern here that, you know, I could continue to repeat over and over again, as long as I know my spacing and everything. This one on the left here would technically be overlapping the one on the right, so that my pattern continues on. So we'll always have one overlap, one duplicate that we'd have to get rid of in that sense and everything, knowing what that spacing is, that offset distance is. And for me, it would be a measurement, right? And things. So the, let's see here. And I really don't have the other half of this bottom to create, you know, coming up all the way. So I would actually just use one of these. Let me see. Yeah. We don't need all of these. Let me undo this. I'm going to take just one of these. One. I need just one. Just one. Zoom in close. If you can't get to it when it's far away, zoom in, zoom in, zoom in. Okay, two more. There we go. All right, oh, three more. 1, 2, 3. Now, so I don't have to deal with all that again. I'm going to group, G for group that together as one. Now, with one of these objects, I can create a linear row, linear copy of a rows and columns and rows. Let's do that. Columns, left to right, and rows to create the pattern that I want. And also, let's get rid of this. And so all that seaming and sewing and everything they did together, I really didn't need to do that, right? Well, it just depends on what the pattern is and what you're trying to get out of it. For me, what I'm wanting to get out of this is I would like that when this comes together, that I have a space of, you know, a very small amount of space here. And when this comes together, kind of get that centered right about there and create an entire array of these items, right? So I need to know what my offset is from one part to another. So when I'm doing an array of this, I need to, on my offset is basically from the left side of one part to the left side of another part. What is that offset, right? And so I know that when I click on this, it shows me what my X, how wide my part is, right? And like I said, I want a certain gap from left to right in between there. So technically, the size of my part plus my gap would be my offset. Left side of 1, that 10 inches, right? 10.1846. Plus whatever space I want, that takes me to the left side of my next one, right? So that's my offset distance. And in this case, let me measure what this is, just, you know, that spacing there based on this size of this project. It's like 36 inches. If I took a measurement, just a real quick and dirty measurement to kind of get a number from here to here, I'm roughly about 1/4 of an inch, right? So I'll use just 1/4 as my number. And now that I know that, okay, now then I got to find out row 2. So when row 1 comes, you know, with my columns, however many columns across in my one row, row 2 is going to be offset so that it falls into that center area. And it's not going to be only offset on the X where that whole row is shifted over by that amount, but it's also going to be offset on the Y to where everything is shifted halfway up. It's almost like when you're making your American flag Union stars kind of thing and stuff. But in this sense, basically, if I were to, we have, our offsets are 2 things. Number 1, left side of one part to the left side of another, and bottom of one part to the bottom of another. Okay, what is that? That's the Y offset. So the bottom of one part to the bottom of the next, what's that Y offset? And so if I were to, based on kind of this spacing here and the way that that looks, and you know, visually right now, that's why I kind of just drug it over to look at it. If I were to measure vertically from the bottom, the very bottom of this part, to the very bottom of one of my other parts here on the side, my offset distance is about 5 3/4 inches. Okay, 5.73. So that would be my offset distance on the Y, 5.75. So I'm going to write that down just so I have that. Okay, 5.75. And then I want that 1/4 of an inch distance here. So I take, if I look at my array tool and I select one of my objects, my object shape here is 10.1846, right? So that's my 10.1846, and I'm going to add the 1/4 to that. Okay, and that'll give me my distance. So here's what I want. I want, on my offset here, I want my 10.1846 plus 0.25 equals 10.4396. Okay, round it up, do whatever you want to do. But that's going to be the number. On the Y now, the Y is going to be that 5.75. Okay. let's see here. Let's get rid of this copy and this. We'll start here. And I think I can, on this particular board, I can go 1, 2, we'll go 4 columns, right? So 4 columns. It's going to go off the board, but bear with me on this. And then here I'll go 3 rows, right? Just so we can see that pattern, right? 3 rows. Now, based on this alone, if I come in here and create this, it's going to create the rows on top of each other, right? Because I'm only going 5 3/4 on the Y, okay? And my part is 10.03 inches tall, right? Well, now I need to offset every other row. Okay, I need to offset every other row. And so down here in my displacement, I'm displacing every other row by a certain amount, whether it be on the X or the Y, depending on which way it's going to be shifting. In this case, it's going to be on the X. So for me, my displacement is half the distance of what my X offset is, right? So if I take my 10.4396, I should be able to divide that by 2 to get that pushed over by that amount. So let's take a look and let's find out. So if I copy that, I should get that nice spacing and pattern that I want, right? And now, as I continue, let me undo that. Let's say that it was 5 rows and 5 columns. I should start to be able to develop that nice wall pattern. You should start seeing it come to life, right? Hey, Mark Lindsay, have a good one, man. Thanks, bud. And Mark, you asked a question. I'll get an answer to that. So check back here in just a few minutes. I'll watch that. So this pattern is starting to take shape, if you will. Now, what my goal is, let's say that this was going to be my wall art, right? Number one is, do I want some kind of frame? Whether it's just a plain square frame or not, I need to make sure that my rows and columns cover this entire board for my next step. So if I were to take this design and this pattern and center it onto my material, does it cover every inch of that board? And it does. So the 5 rows and 5 columns cover that entire board. Okay, good. So we have taken our shape that is 10.4396 inches. We've added a 1/4 inch to that because that's the spacing we wanted from each one. And that gave us our offset distance on the X. Our Y offset, because every other row was pushed up, so it kind of falls in between. We measured, I just made one up and then I measured 5.73 inches, so 5 3/4. That gives us our Y offset, right? And that creates somewhat of our pattern, but the rows have to be displaced. So we have to move everything over by at least half of that X spacing, and that gives us this pattern, right? So this displacement. And that's how we would come up with any of our wall patterns. And what I generally do, if we come back here to just the one, is when I have a shape, okay, I'll give you an example. Let's say that I have a triangle, okay? All right. Now, I want to create a linear array of copies of this triangle. I need to know what my offset is, or gap, because a gap, you have 2 choices on the spacing. The gap is the distance between the right side of one and the left side of the other. You could do a gap, or you could do an offset. I tend to like to work with offset. It's the left side of one to the left side of the other, plus whatever spacing I want in between, right? So it's kind of it's a little bit easier for me. And in this case, let me make my triangle a decent size, right? So we're going to go, that's move. Let's go to the size tool. And I'm just going to go make it a nice, good round number, 4.5. Okay, on the width. That's just for my width. And I'll go 4 inches on the height. Okay. Now, what I tend to do for myself is I tend to make, when I'm trying to figure out what my offset is and my placement and all, is I tend to manually create a small little array. And in this case, if I hold down the control key, I can drag a copy over. And I can then, determine what spacing looks good. I might even take this shape, hold down my control key, right? And let's take this shape, and I'm going to hit the letter V to flip it vertically, right? And, come in here, and I look at, my spacing and stuff and determine what looks good. What looks good for the spacing, the displacement, and all that. And I can even, if I want to make sure it's evenly spaced, okay, here's another thing. If I want to make sure it's evenly spaced, I can use another shape like a rectangle. Okay. And I'll take this rectangle here and bring it out. And I could take these 3 objects, hold down the shift key, select this object, the rectangle last, and I could, in my alignment tool, my space inside the last vector horizontally, I could space them to create, a spacing that I want. But what I don't want is I don't want what happened to just happen. And the reason why that happened is because my rectangle is actually touching the other shapes. So I'm going to just make my rectangle ever so slightly bigger. Okay. Ever so slightly bigger. So that way, when I do come in and select these and do my spacing, and I know what it's doing. It's spacing me based on this third rectangle being upside down. It's counting it as a shape even though it's flipped the wrong way, and it's giving me this spacing. So I'm going to eliminate this. I'm going to select these 2 objects here and this object and align spacing to get that spacing, right? That third one was throwing it off because even though it's flipped upside down in the wide parts at the top, it's still basing the spacing on the wide part, not the narrow point down at the bottom. Do you know what I mean? It's still kind of doing that. Well, now that this is perfectly spaced inside this rectangle, right? I can now take my third rectangle. I'll hold the control key down. I can hit the letter V and flip that third rectangle. I can bring that third rectangle down, and I could almost line up the tops here, right? So I could almost line the tops up there. And all I have to do is just center that rectangle inside this here. So if I take this, or that triangle, inside this rectangle, and I could center it left to right, then I get that perfect spacing, right? So that's all I'm doing. Now that I know what my spacing is, my pattern, right? I can now measure. So get rid of the rectangle. We don't need that. I can now measure that spacing. So remember, from the left side of one to the left side of other. Now these two are on row 1. This triangle is considered row 2, 3, 4, 5. Even though it's right here in this, it looks like it's in the same row, right? It's in the same row. It's not. It's row 2. You guys and girls with me? Okay. So it's still row 2 because it's flipped. So here's what my measurement is. For my offset from the left side of one part horizontally to the left side of the other part, all right, I'm at 47678, right? That's my number. Okay, so 4.7678. And that includes my spacing and everything, right? That is my offset from the left side of one to the left side of the other. Now, my displacement for the row 2, that displacement is going to be half of that. Okay, so I'm moving that second row over. And my Y gap, remember, it's the bottom of one part to the bottom of the next. So the bottom of this part to the bottom of this is 0. It's on the same plane. You guys and girls with me on that? Okay, so that's 0. So if I were making an array copy of this, let's get rid of these two now that I know my numbers. I would select this object here. In my array tool, my offset is going to be 4.7678 on the X. My Y offset, okay, my Y offset is 0. We just talked about there's 0 offset from the bottom of one part to the bottom of the other, so it's going to bring it down. All right. My displacement, every other row. Now, if I just created this as it is with no displacement, okay, on here, on this shape, if I created it as it is with no displacement, there is, it's not really going to let me, you see the copy tool is not turned on. It's not going to really let me because there, you know, on this 0 here, it's, what am I trying to say? It can't accept that. It's saying, no, there's no, you're basically, you're going to be in, if you do this, as you have it written, you're going to create duplicates, and I'm not going to allow you to create duplicates because it would literally throw row 2 right on top of 2.1 because there's nothing switched about it. It doesn't know to flip every other triangle upside down, you know, every other row. It doesn't know that yet. That's my design, right? Until I go to the symmetry. The symmetry. Okay? On the symmetry, then I can make those changes. So for row 1, all the triangles are going to face, they're going to go one way, right? But on row 2, they're going to be upside down. They're going to be upside down from there. Okay? So we've got that. Now, my displacement, again, it's not going to let me quite do this yet. So my displacement is going to be half of this distance. So we'll copy this value, put it in here, and we'll divide it by 2. Okay. And here, it needs a number. It's saying, okay, hey, I know you want me to create this, and I see that you have me flipping every other row, but I need something there, right? So what is that number for us? Is it the height of our triangle, which is 4? Right? That's what our height is on our Y, 4 inches. So the copy and everything, if I go 4 inches, not quite what we were shooting for, right? Not what we were wanting. If we look, it's flipping every other row. Thumbs up on that. It's shifted everything over. Thumbs up on that. But it's not putting things where they belong. Now, let's take a look at what we need to do here. So we have to come in and I'm going to turn the symmetry off so you can kind of, this one's going to be a little bit trickier to understand, but I'm going to turn the symmetry off, turn this off and this off, undo this, turn it off, make sure everything's facing the same way here. Okay, I'm going to create this as it is here. So basically, we've just kind of created this little, almost like a Chinese checker pattern, if you will, right? And so our spacing, okay, we've got our spacing on our X, so each row here is exactly like it is, doing exactly like it is. Now, if I turn symmetry on, okay, if I turn symmetry on here, this upside down, this upside down, let's undo that pattern and create this again. It says, okay, you got me shifting, which I've done, but I've taken that part on row 2. You've just had me flip it over, but it flipped it based on the, if I had to take one part here and I go into the mirror tool so you can kind of see this. If I go into the mirror tool and I flip it based on its kind of center, if I flip it vertically, right, that's all it's done. It's flipping every other row based off of that shape's center, right? Because this is what it's 4 inches, right? We went up 4 inches, that's our Y. And then I had it flip every other row, so, but it threw those things way up here, right? So what do we need to do? We need to basically come in and undo this and go back into here. And on this number, again, if I go 0 there, it's not going to let me, right? It's not going to let me. So I have to kind of, I have to have something, right? So in this case, I wish I remembered what my spacing was. I'm just going to go 0.25. Okay, so that I can copy that. And what should happen is I should get this kind of, thing going on here. So it's giving me that 0.25, right? And I think I'm going to be wrong on this. I think I'm actually going to be wrong on this. But if I flip every other one, flip, okay. All right, and then I put my displacement in. Bear with me. I need this number. Copy the value. Paste. Divide that by 2. Equals. Okay. We're getting that pattern here, but now my Y rows, they're not quite right? And so I need to go I can't use the I might be able to use the displacement. Let's go 4 inches. I think that's going to do every other row. Yep, I knew that was going to happen. Can't do that. 4 divided by 2 is what it should be. But it's not. But displacement is the wrong place for that. 4 divided by 2 equals. Nope. Okay, so displacement is no. That's got to be 0. This, I can't go 4 1/4. That wouldn't be it. Nope. What is half? This needs to be 2 here. Undo. I need half my shape. That flipping kicked my ass on that one. 2 is not right. It's flipping on the center, so that is correct. Let me go here. Let's do this. You're like, Laney, right. You had it there, dumbass. All right, let's see here. Okay. That's the pattern I want. That is the pattern I want. But I want this row down lower. What number do I have to get to that number, right? Now, my center is here. Okay? So, let's grab this. That's the center. When I'm doing my symmetry, that's what it's flipping that part on. Okay? So, based on that, okay, based on that being the center, knowing that part's going to flip there, if I took this and I moved it down where I want it, which would be probably something like that. Let me use my guideline. Okay. That spacing there, where is my, if I flip this, right? Let's flip it back over. I'm going to hit the letter H here. Got to close this tool. Not H, Laney. V, vertical. All right. So, I'm at 0. Now, here's the kicker with this. It's not going to let me be at 0. It's not going to let me create that array. So, what will it let me do? If I came in with my symmetry exactly right, my rows, I might be able to go, let's go as small as possible. Let's go a 1/16 of an inch. Here, okay. That's not going to let me do that either. Because if I do that, hold on now. Damn, screwed myself up. In my head, I know exactly what I'm doing. We're going to get back to the ornate shape in just a minute, but this, I need you to understand this, and I got to, evidently, triangle was probably not the way to go with it, but let's find out here. Copy, or, come on, Laney. Copy that, paste it here, divided by 2. Okay. Now, if I create this, that's creating my rows and columns, right? So these two are row 2, these two are row 1. Row 2 is an 1/8 inch up. Now, if I flip my symmetry, that gives me the pattern that I want. So I can't go quite 0. It's not going to let me, because if I go 0 here, let's undo this. If I go 0 here, I gray out, right? So I got to have something. So in this case, we'll go 1/16 of an inch, and I can live with that. 1/16 of an inch, okay? And that creates this pattern. Now, what happens when I go to create rows 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? So let's find out. Let's go column wise. We'll go 6, okay? So if I do that, we have that pattern. We have these shapes here. Let's get rid of this guideline, okay? But what happens with rows 3, 4, and 5 if I go more than 2 rows, right? So let's find out. Undo this, and let's add in a 3rd row. Okay, just one more. 3rd row. Okay, it stacks it another 1/16 of an inch up, and we can't do that, right? So the limitation on this particular pattern is that the offset here, it's not, what am I trying to say? It's not enough to be up at the top of that 4 inches, that 4 1/16, if you will, right? And if I did put in 4 1/16, that's too far. It's too far spread apart, right? So with the 3 rows. So for me, in order to create the pattern that I want to create with this, I have to go my 1/16 of an inch with the triangles. And it's not always going to be that way, but in this case, it looks like it is. Create that, 2 rows. And then now that I have this pattern from here, I can take and Control C, Control V, copy and paste, and I can move that row up. Or I'm sorry, we'll do it the smart way. I can take this with my array of tools here. I've already created however many columns I want, but now I can create, this is 1 row, or I'm sorry, 1 column, and I can go 4 rows, right, of this selected group here. I could even group it together, right? You know, you could group that together. G for group. But I want to go, I want 1 column. We're going to consider this 1 column, and I'll go 4 rows. My rows, all right, the columns are going to be, the rows are going to be 4 inches. From the bottom, it's my offset here. Or I could go a gap this time, right? And the gap would be a 1/16 of an inch. So if I create that, then I'm creating that pattern, right? With that spacing. Now that spacing isn't quite right. It's a 1/16 is what I thought it would be, but I think that's going to be more of an 1/8. Let's measure. From here to here. Yeah. It's going to be around 1/8. So let's undo that. and create that offset with an 1/8 of an inch pattern. 125 to create, you know, that wall this way. So I had to sacrifice what I wanted to do in order to create that pattern, because the offset, having that triangle come down almost 0, it won't let me go 0, so I had to go with a number, 1/16 of an inch. It allowed me to create 2 rows, and then those rows I could copy up, right? So that's that. Now back to here, back to this pattern. Okay, I'm taking my, on my offset, I'm taking my 10.1846. I'm adding plus my 1/4 of an inch. Okay, that's my number. I'm going to take that number and down here on my displacement and divide it by 2. Generally, that's what, you know, with that that overlay. My Y here is 5.75, if you guys remember from earlier. And we're going 5 rows, 5 columns to create that pattern. Okay? I'm taking this pattern and I'm going to center it onto the material, align to the center of the material. And now what I want to do is, what I probably should have done to begin with, is I need to draw a rectangle the size of my board. And if you guys were with me last week, or if any time when we talked about our calculation edit boxes, I don't physically have to draw a rectangle here to get a rectangle drawn on this board. What I do need to do is make sure that my anchor points are the same and all that stuff. So in this case, the center of my rectangle, I want it based on my width divided by 2 equals, okay, 18 on that 36. And my height, the letter H, divided by 2 equals, so 12 on my 24. I need this shape to be my width minus 2 inches. I want a 1 inch frame all the way around this, equals. And my height minus 2 inches, H minus 2. And I could use the letter Y or X as well too, minus 2 equals. And I can create that rectangle there without having to try to draw it behind all this stuff. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my group of items, okay, turn off the rectangle, my group of items, and I'm going to group them together. I want to make sure they're all grouped together, but I'm going to select this rectangle that I drew, this frame, last, and then I'm going to go into my trim tool, and I want to clear everything outside of that boundary away. Okay, get rid of everything outside of that boundary and have it trim and redraw these vectors. Give it a moment to process. Probably just crashed the system, my luck, because I haven't saved. Shit. I didn't save. So, give it just a second. It's thinking. Collecting vector and component data, 0%. We'll let that think for a minute. While that's thinking, any questions so far? See ya, Sylvia. Any questions so far on arrays, right? That's what we created. So basically, creating a nice little array, right? I have to use that more. I would spend about 3 hours to trim and scissor. Yeah, right. Now, in the case of this, it's going to take a moment to think about what it's doing, because it's got to retrim. It's going to erase everything on the outside here and redraw those vectors. Now, was grouping all those together, was that the way to go? Probably yes. However, I have essentially two groups going on. So this is really thinking hard because I have my individual item grouped, and then I have all of those items, those individual items grouped. So there's essentially two groups. And this thing has got to take and figure out, okay, I need to ungroup this and trim to this rectangle vector. So the software is processing some serious data right now, and it's not moving along. I probably would have been better off ungrouping everything and just selecting it all and grouping it one group and then trim, and it would have trimmed just fine. Okay, so it's going to take a minute to clear all that, and while that's let that trim, and we'll see that you'll basically see the finished piece when it trims here in a second. But while that's trimming, I do want to talk and answer a quick question for someone. Someone saw, let me see if I can pull up the design. Campfire sign. And Jeff, we worked on this today, so you'll kind of, you'll understand what I got going on. But let me see if I can find the actual image of the sign. Round. Images, and I'll pull that up. Trying to find the actual wooden carved image. Bear with me. Add or wrong. Where, oh, where are you tonight? Where in the hell is that sign? Jeff, I should have stole your copy. Okay, one last place to look. So sorry, guys and girls. Waiting for that to process. Let's see if it's still thinking. So I might have to undo that. It might crash that system. And if it does, I can get right back to it very quickly. But let me see if I can find that image real quick. Okay, it's not there. Type in it's not there. One more place, guys. Sorry. There it is. Thank God. Okay. Let's move this over. Thought this was going to take me forever. Okay. So Jeff earlier today had a sign he saw. He said how, and I worked with him one-on-one with this, but I thought it would be a great way to kind of show you guys how to quickly come up with things like this. But he said, how do you come up with, this carving, this type of design? Very simple to do. The Adirondack chairs and campfire, that happens to be an SVG that is available for sale on Etsy. Actually, this whole design here is available for sale as a vector on Etsy for $2.54, right? But I wanted to show Jeff, and just like I want to show you, how to make this from scratch. So we're going to go with a 10-inch by 10-inch board, just as an example, while that's calculating. It hasn't moved an inch. If by the time I finish the sign, if it doesn't trim that, we're going to go back and fix it real quick. But 10-inch circle. Okay. Let's get that circle centered on the board. How big do we want our frame? In this case, I think he said 1 inch. So we're going to offset inward 1 inch. Okay. For me, that's too much. I'm going to say a 1/2 inch on a 10-inch circle. That looks better. That particular had some trees at the top. It had the Adirondack chairs, and it had the 2 message boxes down below that were shaped like the circle. Now, I'm not going to use the Adirondack chairs. Trees will be fine. We can do some trees, but we'll do something different in the middle. Now, we're going to take and we're going to create a rectangle right here. And that rectangle is going to be a size of whatever size I want my name. Okay, so I want it to be somewhat beefy in this example. Now, on this rectangle, wherever I decide that I'm going to put it, where do I want the name, where do I want all the top stuff and all, the name's fine right here. And established date or, whatever little information is going to be down here. Now, I want to separate the space between the name and here. So if we, again, looking at the image, let's see here. As the example, this is just our muse, if you will. Download, open that up, get to it. All right. The bottom name is just a box with text in it, V-carve, right? And then it has an established date or whatever you want down there. But notice that there's a gap between these two, right? So we don't worry about drawing the smaller shape. We worry about drawing the gap. So I have the outline where my big box is going to be, and that's fine. Now I'm going to take a smaller rectangle to create the gap. So we'll take how big of a gap do I want? Just a nice little narrow one there. And that's what I'm going to trim. So when I take my scissors here and I trim this way, I'm going to end up trimming this line right here to create that gap. Right, so let's get rid of all this rectangle stuff here and that line. So now I have the lower section and the upper section. Now the upper section I haven't trimmed yet because I want to put something in there, right? In this case, we'll do the trees. So I'm going to import some pine trees, a picture of some pine tree forest. Okay, I'm going to take that image and trace it, turn it into a bitmap, right? Turn it into a bitmap or a vector, not take a bitmap and turn it into a vector. In this case, we're going to 82, we'll make it 75. Turn this up to 5, preview, apply and close. Now on this, I don't care about any of the, and let's get rid of the image for a minute. On this tracing, I don't care about any of the little vectors inside. They're going away, right? I want the tops of these trees. That's all I want. So I'm going to ungroup, U for ungroup, and I'm going to get rid of all the inside vectors. Delete those. Okay. All the inside vectors, none of them don't want, just want the outside profile basically. Here I'm going to lower it down to where they're inside the circle, and I am going to stretch it out a little bit. Okay, so we'll stretch it out some. All right, and we'll go about like that. Now, node editing. Okay, basically I'm going to be trimming these shapes here. Let's take, let me lower this down just a little bit more, get that tree in the boundary. That'll be good. Oh, let me bring this one down. That'll work. Okay, I'm going to take my scissors and basically I'm going to just find a spot here, and in this case I will trim right there and right there. Okay, come all the way over here and trim here and there. All right, and then down here, same thing. I'm going to trim, get rid of that because this is my big box, right? Trim this away, trim this away, trim everything outside, get rid of all this stuff out of here because none of that stuff is any good to me anymore. No good, no good, no good. All right, and then I'm going to get rid of the top of this box here. All right, now I can just select and be selective and delete. Okay, so delete that, delete this. Now I've got this design, right? So we've got this design. Okay, now text, I'm just gonna put, we'll go Grand Adventure, that'll be fine. And I'll oh, let me see here. Yeah, we'll just do a welcome kind of sign, right? All right, let me make this. And I actually want, I want to redo something here. I'm going to delete this right there, and I'm going to re-offset this circle back inward again, 1/2 inch, get that back basically. And what I want is, I actually want this rectangle here to be a little bit bigger. Okay, just a little bit bigger. And then I'm going to take and get my little rectangle again, put it back in there, my little gap. Let's retrim that, okay? So first thing I'm going to do is retrim up here. Okay, get rid of all that. Down here, same thing, just like I did before. Okay, now I've got some trash right there. Delete that. All right, I got a little bit of an overlap going on there. Let me see if I can clean that up. Wonderful. Okay, so make sure I have no duplicates. I do. I've got a vector right there that I need to delete. All right, and I should have one closed vector here, and it's not closed, it's open. So that means there is a little speck of something going on. I got an overlap somewhere right here, right? So let's clean that up. Okay, and this one is not going to let me clean it up very well unless I go into node editing mode and pull this. I'm just going to pull that back to there. Okay. So that should allow me to be closed now, which I am. Okay. Now, let's get welcome centered in that. There. I just wanted to make it a little bit bigger for the welcome sign. So get that. Oops. Don't do that. Centered. And let's weld the welcome sign to get rid of the overlaps. And I'll just replace them. Okay. So we have this welcome. And I don't know. Maybe down here at the bottom, I'll throw in a house number, right? Or something. Whatever. You know. Or it could be an established. It could be whatever it is. That's not the important part. Make your design whatever you want to make the design. I'm just throwing something together really quickly. Now, in the line to center, and I actually think it would look better looking about there. Okay, not quite center, but close enough. All right, now on this, I've got this overlapping line right here. We need to just delete that out. That's part of that circle. When I re-offset it, it was already there. You know, we want to make sure that we're all clean. Now, if I carve this as is, if I do a V-carve toolpath, very simple, V-carve toolpath, and we got to go check on our other design. I'm going to go with a 1/8 inch flat depth, 60-degree V-bit, and I'll use 1/4 and 1/8. If I calculate this, get to it. Okay, if we preview the visible toolpath, okay, and let's do a profile cut so you can kind of get the full visual picture. Profile cut, cutting it out. Whoa. That's weird. 0.75, not 75 inches. 0.75. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit of color just so you can kind of get the idea. So we have the sign. We're missing the Adirondack chairs and all. It could be whatever you want to put in there. You know, you're just adding basically another graphic, right? In the case of this image here, it was 2 Adirondack chairs, a little campfire, and wine glasses. And again, that graphic's something you can buy on Etsy for, you know, a few bucks. But literally, that's what we're doing. Now, if I were to take and let's turn the color off for a minute. If I were to take and change that up slightly by not having the outside vector selected when I calculate, it's going to create a reverse of the cut. So if I turn this off and calculate that, then I'm going to get a reversal of everything where the trees are kind of three-dimensional. So if we redo this and preview all the toolpaths again, my numbers and my letters and my trees are kind of have that raised effect, right? And then whatever would be in the middle here, right? It could be the Adirondack chairs, all that stuff. So depending on either way I want to go, I can go either way. That could be taken. I can go anyway. All right, so I'm either got raised letters and raised trees, and then whatever my design is here. Hell, it could be a picture of a pickup truck. It could be RV. It could be, I don't care, whatever, right? A lake. It could be your last name. It could be anything, right? So you're kind of filling this in, whatever it is. You could have raised letters where it's all raised like this, or vice versa, where everything is carved down and the trees and the letters are, you know, carved in like before, the other one. So option one, basically when the toolpath calculated, the outside vector is not part of the calculation. Option two, the outside vector is part of the calculation. So his initial question originally was, how did they create this lower area here and this little area? I couldn't quite figure that out. And it's a matter of, we took our circle, we took our rectangles, and then we just trimmed, right? We trimmed to create that little gap in between. So now our circle connected with that, you know, that area here. And then the circle connected with this rectangle to create this shape. That's all it is. And then they took the trees that they had in there. They ended up trimming them and connecting the vectors just like we did here. So that's how you've got that design there, right? So if ever, you know, anything like that, your signs, there's so many different ways that you can create signage and stuff with things raised and patterns and stuff like that. That whole pattern with the Adirondack chairs, you could go buy for $2.60 on Etsy. You just fill in the text, right? All the other stuff is drawn out. You can find those designs all over the place, you know, for that. But I wanted to, you know, when I worked with him today, we worked on, you know, how to make this and everything. And I wanted to kind of share that with you guys real quick. Now, getting back to here, this has only processed 1% in that whole time that we were gone. So we're going to hit the X here and stop the procedure. And we'll see how long it takes to stop. It may crash before it stops. We'll find out here in about 2 seconds. Yeah. That was brutal. Okay, so one of my problems with this is I have too many groups going on here. So this group, if I ungroup it, okay, it's still individual groups. Okay, so I'm going to ungroup them. Okay, so they're open. And now I should be able to select all of these as they're open, so it's not multiple groups. It's just all individual vectors. And I should be able to group them together as one item. Okay. And I should be able to now trim them fairly cleanly and quickly, clearing outside that boundary. It should process a little bit faster. A lot faster, actually. If it doesn't, then we're going to keep everything ungrouped and clear outside. So it might be the grouping that's causing the issue. So once again, it's taking some time to think. I'm not being impatient, but it actually shouldn't take this long. You know, if you have a decent processing computer and everything, it really shouldn't take very long. So I'm going to undo that or stop it, the little red X at the bottom. You only need to click it once. I'm clicking it like 100 times because I'm being impatient because time's running out. But We'll let it catch up its thoughts. And we're going to go back and ungroup it and try the trim with everything ungrouped. So once again, let's ungroup everything. Okay. And I just want to make sure that the rectangle is selected last. And also, I need to make sure that things that aren't overlapping my lines, they don't necessarily need to be selected, but that's fine. But I make sure that rectangle is selected last, and let's try this again. Trim, clearing outside the boundary, and clear. And we'll see as an ungrouped item if anything speeds up. We'll find out momentarily. Because it might be one of those cases where, who was it said, man, I'd be spending so much time trimming with scissors. We might have to do that, right? Now, while this is thinking, we'll give this one a few minutes to think. Not a few minutes, but let's think about something here. I have to use that more often. I would spend 3 hours with scissors. So yeah, Jerry, we might end up having to do that. I'll show you how to quickly do that. But let's see here. Harvey, thank you for the reminder. Appreciate that. Thanks, Harvey. How do you cut out the trees to look nice? How do you cut out the trees to look nice? Sandy. Did the trees not look nice? Let me know. Be a little bit more explain to me what you mean by that, please. Laney's ability to think on the fly is always interesting and continues to demonstrate this depth of his knowledge. Thanks. I appreciate that. I've cut out trees and the bits, even 1/16 was too big. I'm using a V-bit. So we're not using an end mill, we're using a V-bit. The end mill is just for the flat areas. The V-bit is doing all the edge work on the trees, so it gets into those nice little crevices, those in and outs and everything. If I tried to use an end mill on that as a pocket cut, it's going to look like crap. It's a V-carve cut with a flat depth that combines the V-bit with a pocket, or the V-cut with a pocket, and all the edge work and everything gets, the V-bit can get into those tight edges because of the small sharp point. So that's why it looks much better than if you try to do it as a pocket cut. While we'll give that just a few moments to think, but imagine, if you will, if I did this as a pocket cut, not a V-carve, but a pocket cut. We'll go just 1/8 of an inch like before. I'll go with a 1/8 inch end mill. I'll even go down to a 1/16. So select, and we'll put in a 1/16 in there as well. And calculate that. Reset the preview, turn off hold on a minute. Stop what you're doing there, buddy. Reset the preview. Preview the visible toolpath, and we'll turn off the color. Okay, so let's turn off the color. All right. And so as a pocket cut, number one, the little points and things on the leaves, even with a 1/16 of an inch end mill, I'm not getting those sharp edges or anything. It's kind of rounding it off based on the radius of my bit as a pocket cut. In my text and everything, if there was any square corners, which I don't know if there was, I don't think there was at all, I'm not going to get that because, again, the radius of my router bit. All in all, it doesn't look too bad and everything, but I would much prefer to run that same cut as a V-carve toolpath with a V-bit and my 2 bits. In this case, I'll just use a 1/4 and an 1/8 because the V-bit will go in and tighten up and get wherever the end mills can't. But let that calculate out. Reset that preview and preview that visible toolpath. And this way, when it my end mills are going to come in and do their cutting, but wherever they couldn't get to, the V-bit will come in and I'll get that much tighter area where the V-bit can get to. You know, you see the tool marks here showing where the V-bit is versus the smooth surface where the end mills are. So the end mills can only get in here, but my V-bit can get into those tighter corners and everything and make the trees look, you know, spiky like trees, right? Kind of deal. So it's just a matter of a V-carve toolpath with a flat depth versus a straight pocket cut, right? Okay. I still need to save the project so you don't lose it. Yes, that is true. Let's go back to that project. All right, this still hasn't processed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take only, let me stop this one more time. And there's only one last thing that I can do here. So let it stop. Let me stop processing it one more time. The little red X at the bottom. Get a drink of water. Okay. Now this time, the only other option that I have besides sitting there and cutting this is anything that is not touching, right? I'm going to do my best to try to delete it, right? Get rid of it. So anything that's not part of the board in the design, right? I don't want to trim that, so turn that off. So anything that's not part of, okay, can't do that. Let's go this way. Let me stay on the outside here. Minimize how much work or how much thinking the system has to do. So basically I'm drawing a selection window right up to the rectangle, and anything that's 100% in there, I'm, you know, pretty much selecting it. But if it's touching that border at all, then I'm not, you know, I'm not going to delete it. So by eliminating as much as possible that's not part of that design, now if I come in, I'm going to still group, I'm going to group everything together again. Group everything that's together. And I'm going to select that boundary last again. And I'm going to trim, clearing outside of that boundary away again. And let's see if it does it a little bit faster. So I had to regroup. Why wasn't it working and all that? So there's some stuff out here that's not even touching that rectangular border. Get rid of it, right? Clean it up the best we can. And then regroup, right? So now I don't need that rectangular border anymore. Now I have a panel here with that cool little design. Now I'll take a minute and just save this file, save as. And Ornate Ornate wall art. So don't just completely give up on something. If something's not quite working the way you think about why. So my first thought was I had too many groups. I had individual groups and then I had them all grouped, right? The software's thinking too hard to try to, what do I ungroup and what do I trim, right? So, okay, let's ungroup everything. Ungroup it and then just make one big group. That still didn't work. Still wouldn't process quick enough. So, okay, go back and ungroup everything. Try to trim that way. That didn't work. So, what's the deal? We're trimming to that rectangle boundary, so what's the point of having anything selected that's not touching that boundary, that's outside of it, but that's not touching it? Maybe it's just too much. You know, it's like it's thinking, okay, how is that vector supposed to trim to this when it's not even part of the design, right? So then, okay, go back and clear out what you can clear out, you know, without diminishing the design too much. And that's what we did, and it trims, right? So we just got to think, you know, think about what it is. Now, in this case, V-carve Toolpath, we're going to, in this, it's going to go twofold. I'm going to do it two ways. We'll see which way looks better. This one, no flat depth required for me. No flat area clearance tools. Calculate. I should be okay unless I get a warning. If I get a warning, then I'll put a flat depth in. But it should. I might have a couple of deep areas right here. We'll find out here in about 2 seconds. It'll warn me in about 2 seconds, maybe more. It's a calculating. It's a big design too, you know. I mean, you got to think about this is 36 by 24 and all that ornate stuff. Reset that preview, get rid of that, and preview the visible toolpath. So as a piece of wall art or something, or I could cut this thing out into the shape of a headboard, whatever the case may be. Let me turn the color off just for a minute. So option number one, okay, option number one is where it's just a nice V-carve panel, right? Option number one is that. All right. Option number two is on my rectangle that I ended up deleting. That rectangle right there that I ended up deleting. I'm going to offset it outward by a 1/16 of an inch. And I'm going to create sharp corners. I'm going to delete the original, that original rectangle, and offset that out so that way that rectangle is not touching these lines. Okay. And we're going to create that a same V-carve toolpath, but this time with the rectangular boundary in there. And I'm actually looking at that. I'm going to go 1/8 of an inch offset. So let's undo that offset, undo, and let's go 1/8 of an inch, 0.125. Delete the original, offset, just a little bit wider. That's good. All right, select all this, V-carve toolpath. In this case, there is going to be a flat depth. I am going to limit the cut, and I'm going to limit it to 1/8 of an inch, 0.125. Could go deeper, whatever you want to do. I like a 60-degree V-bit for something like this, but we'll go, and that's what we'll go with. And I, just in case, this is a big project, so I will leave the two flat bits in there. Okay, so 1/4 inch and 1/8 inch. It's kind of my go-tos. All right, calculate this out. And then after this, we'll wrap it up with any questions. So we did save it all. let's see here. Sandy, I would use a sharp angled V-bit, 30 or 15 degree, to make the tree sharper. There you go. So Generations Custom Creations. Thanks for answering Sandy's question. Good to go. When this is done, I'll save it one more time to save the final changes and everything, but we'll let this calculate, give it just a second. And what this is going to do is, from what it was, the V-carve that we just did a moment ago, it's going to be a reversal. So everything that was carved down is now going to be up, and everything that was up is going to be carved down. So by putting that rectangular boundary around it, we're just reversing the cut. So I think it will look more ornate reversed. We'll look at both of them again, and then you can decide, right? Lainey, how long did it take to carve your sign? So we'll go both ways on that one. This sign here, right, with the profile cut. Little camp sign with the profile cut, Ronnie, takes about 35 minutes. Not counting whatever design would be above the word welcome, right? So about 35 minutes. For the ornate design, when it's finished calculating, I'll show you those 2 times. And this is gonna it's probably gonna be a few hours. Now, as far as calculating, it's almost done. It's thinking. It's got just another pass to do. That yellow line running across the screen. It's working on it. All right, so let's turn off these toolpaths just for a minute so we can get that visual of what it did look like. There we go. All right, so this is just that standard V-carve. Okay, no rectangular boundary around it or anything. Just it was trimmed, the rectangle was deleted, and the design was V-carved, right? Ronnie, as far as that is concerned, let me find that design. The runtime on that, just a regular V-carve version of that, based on my speeds and feeds, are only about 6 hours on that big old project. So it's a good long one. So that means the reversal, let's reset this back to a blank board, and let's look at the reversal. Preview the visible toolpath, where everything is more in-depthly cut. Now I've only limited it to 1/8 of an inch. That's kind of my go-to number. But I think this looks, in my opinion, looks much better. I like the reverse where it's raised kind of. So if we zoom in, you can see the raised look, right? Just that, you know, much more detail. And everything, we'll add a little color in there. You can see the color, right, with it raised up. I think that looks better as a piece of, you know, wall art than the other way. Either one, right? It's just preference. I like the raised detail. If this was cut into, you know, whatever, an oval shape, a headboard shape, whatever, you know, it could be a neat little pattern and stuff. But Ronnie, to answer your question, for this particular project, the raised portion of it, you're probably looking a good 20 hours, 9 hours, you know, so 9 hours. And again, that's based on my speeds and feeds on my machine. Okay, so your machine might be bigger, might be smaller, but let me turn these Toolpaths off. And that would be the raised, right? So, do you always, Dan asked, do you always carve at 0? Do you always carve at 0? I'm assuming that you're referring to here the start depth. Dan, the start depth, I'm always starting from a blank board at the top of the board, so it's always going to be 0. The only time that it would not be 0, that start depth would not be 0, is if I've already cleared away that material. Let's say I've removed 1/4 of an inch of material, and I need to carve something down at that quarter, then I'm starting 1/4 inch down from the top of my board. My material surface is 0. So if I'm starting 1/4 inch down, that means I'm plunging that bit from the surface of the board down 1/4 of an inch. So I've already better have that material cleared away from another toolpath or something. But in this case, I'm always starting at the top of the board. So it's always going to be 0, right? So let me know if that's what you were asking, if that's what you meant. Do you use Oramask? Yeah, Oramask 813 stencil film. Cover the board, carve, paint, pill, done. That would be a lot of pilling. Holy cow, all those little strips and pieces. But it would probably be a hell of a lot better than trying to sand it and all. Now, how would you finish this raised project? So Mike asked how I would finish it. For me, I think I'll give you an example here. If this was carved in a not that. Hold on. There we go. If this was carved in kind of a walnut or a cherry or something that was real deep and rich, I would use a very close to the grain finish, such as a Danish oil. For me, a Danish oil. If I wanted more of that film build-up finish, might go with a kind of a mixture lacquer and tung oil. I like a close to the wood grain finish. If I was going to build up a layer, then I'm just going to use a cab acrylic lacquer with my sprayer, spray it and all that. But I like kind of a wipe on close to the wood finish. If it was a dark walnut, if it was a lighter wood, let's just as an example, let's say that it was kind of a maple or something, then I would want some kind of contrasting color in there. So I would put some Oramask on it. And I would give it some kind of contrasting, color, something that might, just really go whoa, like a deep maroon. I could go with the grays and the blacks and stuff like that, which are cool. Black really looks good and everything, but I'd probably give it just something that it's wall art, right? So something that has a bit of color, something that has a bit of a pop. So, kind of a nice, dark maroon of some sort. That's more falling along the lines of purple. Bear with me a second. Something to kind of, bring it out. I might go with, kind of a woodsy color or something, a brick, firehouse brick or whatever. But I like, a dark, rich maroon. We're not going to go purple, which would be an option, right? But I'm going to go probably with a dark maroon or something. Depending on, eclectic taste, I could, again, that's got a little bit too much purple for me. You know, if I want to go earthy, I could go with a kind of a hunter green, whatever, you know, happens to fit my decor at the time, you know, right? But I would add some color to it. If not black, it's going to have some kind of color to where it just pops, where it looks at it and it's just eye catching. And for me, like a real rich maroon, even a silver, chrome or gold metallic finish, you know, that wood and metal look, you know, a brushed metal background, you know, aura mask paint, you know, something that really has a shine to it. If I'm gonna go with that metal, wood metal look, you know, and it's gonna be a paint, it's gotta be. I mean, I'm gonna throw in a primer to try to seal that grain as much as possible, so that it's laying on like a flat finish. I don't want this wood metal look, this like it's like where you can actually tell it's wood painted with a metal paint, you know that. I'm gonna throw in a wood sealer, seal that grain up as much as possible. Throw in a primer, light coats, so building up, and then I'm gonna throw my dark finish in because I want that metallic look. I want it to be a sheen, you know, pretty much. And I don't want to have to do a lot of sanding in between all those grooves. Hell no. I'm going to lay it on the best I can and hope I don't end up with something like this. This is a prime example of what I wouldn't want a metal on wood finish to look like. You know, where you paint wood to look like metal, that's, you know, that ruined this whole box. Luckily, this part here as an inlay, it's not glued in, and if I really wanted to, I could pull that part out. I haven't tried yet, but it's not glued in there, and I didn't glue it in, so it would so I could get it out at some point in time. I just can't do it right this second. But because I knew that wasn't going to turn out, I knew it wasn't going to look good. And so I didn't glue this inlay, this piece of maple in here. I didn't glue that in for the simple fact that I can just take it out and replace it with something that would look better, that would be more fitting for this box, right? But that's what I wouldn't want. If I'm going to go with a wood metal kind of look, then man, I'm going to take some time with it. But I think just a nice pop color, you know, with something like that. Now, all right, so Big Daddy has, you know, he's like, hey, could you glue a thin sheet of brass on the face, right? So with the proper bits, with a proper bit, a very thin sheet of brass, I could almost like a contact cement, you know, like a not necessarily a veneer, almost like a melamine coating, but with with brass, a brass sheet or something. If I could get it to where it's going to adhere and not pop or bubble or do whatever. I've had that where, you know, the metal gets cut so thin that it starts springing up, you know. So it's got to be, I mean, it's got to be on there, right? So you could do it, but it's got to be on there. And worst case scenario, if it's not on there, rip it all off, right? If it's starting to pop up, rip it all off, run it through a drum sander, clean it up, you'll be done with it, right? But maybe a resin fill, right? So, do I even still have? Do I? Bear with me. Do I? I do, but I just don't know where I do. Somewhere I have got a really nice, somebody sent it to me. It's a really pretty blue fleck for clear epoxy, right? So epoxy fill would be good and everything. So we have talked about and discussed how to take a design or a shape, if you will. In this case, this guy right here. Let me see here. Are you gonna let me select you? Pretty close. 1, 2, 3, done. Up here, select those, turn that off. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, and group. Oops, ungroup. Turn that off. Oh, you son of a gun. Oh, you son of a gun. Oh, make you want to cry. It's when you push down the wrong key. When you push down the wrong key, right at the very end, when you have everything, when you just took all the time to get that. I was trying to hit the G key for group, and I had my finger still on the shift key because I'm holding the shift key down to add these vectors in, and when I clicked how I shouldn't have clicked, I let go of the shift key instead of keeping the shift key down. I let go of the shift key to turn that off, and I ended up turning them all off. All right, so one more time, group, G for group. But we learned how to take a simple design like this, how to array it to create a very unique pattern, if you will, whatever it may be. We took that pattern, and after we created the array, we covered our entire board with it. We created a rectangle border, cleaned up everything outside of that border, and then we trimmed to that border to trim with our trim tool, clearing outside of the boundary. Once we were able to do that, we offset our boundary outward about 1/8 of an inch. And then we created a V-carve toolpath with a flat depth, a couple of bits, end mills, and a V-bit to create this raised decorative panel, right? And the pattern could be anything. Now, if you notice, like if you look at this design here, I have this lotus flower, right? And if you look here, I have this lotus flower. And not counting this thing that's underneath, we get rid of it. But, right? So I have a lotus flower. So imagine, if you will, that, and this is the last thing, I'm just going to create another sheet, add a new sheet. And on this sheet, I'm just going to make it a 24 by 24 square. And on that sheet, I'm going to take this, we'll take this one. I'm going to take this lotus flower here and move it over to that sheet. I'm going to take this, I'm not going to do any array or any copies or anything. I'm going to get this on the board, ungroup it. U for ungroup, right? Or the ungroup button's over here. I'm going to delete this bad boy, whatever that thing was when I traced it. Take this lotus, center it on the material, size it up. I'm going to use the size tool. I'll bring this up to 20 inches. Yeah, that'll be fine. Take this outside vector, this outside boundary right here, offset. I'm going to offset it outward, not that button, offset it outward 2 inches Outward, we'll create some sharp corners. Get it, get it, get it. Come on. You can do it. Did I even click the button? Yes, I did. All right, 2 inches was too much. I knew that was too much. Let's go 1 inch. And I don't want sharp corners. So when that creates, I'm going to undo it one more time. Come on. There we go. Yeah. Undo that one more time. I want to turn off the sharp corners. Okay. So I want nice rounded, corners and all, right? So now I'm going to take this as it stands here. And bear with me. I'm going to carve between here, raise that. V-carve toolpath. V-carve toolpath. Flat depth, for me, it's 1/8 of an inch all the way. That's kind of my magic number. Calculate that toolpath. Actually, I'm going to stop that toolpath because I don't want the outside border on this particular one selected. Sorry about that. Calculate that toolpath without the border. Sorry. It's going to take a minute. My 1/4 inch end mill probably will be too big to fit in this particular design. Let it calculate. All right. We're going to do and again, here, let's look at it as a square. Could do it as an oval, an ellipse, some type of, design, but let's preview the visible toolpath. So let that carve out. Okay. Some kind of deep, rich background color. Again, it could be black and all, but I think, if this is going to be some kind of floral type design, it could be, something that really stands out for me. I really like the maroons, kind of like, almost like a brick red, kind of color and everything. Just to kind of give it a little bit of that three-dimensional. Now, I'm going to do a profile cut, right? Cutting, in this case, it's 1.5 inch thick material. Didn't need to be that thick, but 1/4 inch end mill, outside cut. I'm just going to do not do it in one pass. I'm going to set it for one pass for just time's sake because we're on a roll here. But you're not going to cut this in one pass. Calculate this toolpath, multiple passes, preview the visible toolpath, get rid of the waste, and I actually, final little touch, I'm going to offset this boundary outward just a 1/16 of an inch. Outward a 1/16 of an inch, 0.0625. I'm going to take the outside boundary of the lotus flower here and that 1/16 of an inch offset out there, and I'm going to do a pocket cut. And on this pocket cut, I'm going to actually cut it down. I'm already cutting a flat depth of 1/8 of an inch there. I'm going to go just a little bit more. Whether I go twice that much or what have you, I'm not sure. But in this case, I'm going to go 3/16, just another 1/8. So 0.1875. I'll run an 1/8 inch. I don't need the 16th. Remove that. Calculate this. It should have been 1/4 and 1/8, but that's okay. We're in 1/8. What I want to do is I'm doing an actual pocket cut, and I overcut by that 1/16 of an inch so it gets a nice clean edge. But the reason why I'm doing that is I want to, let's turn the color off. Is, I don't know if you can see this or not, but bear with me a second. All right, one last fix. This boundary right here, I'm going to offset that a 1/16 of an inch as well. So 1/16 and 1/16. So just this one. And the pocket cut is going to be on my outside 1/16 and my other 1/16 offset. That's what the pocket cut's going to be on. Okay. So calculate that out. All right, reset the preview. We're going to have our V-carve toolpath that will come in and let's move this up in the list. V-carve toolpath is going to hold on a minute. Where did my V-carve toolpath go? All right, my V-carve toolpath got taken away. Hold on a second. We're on a roll here. Turn off these two. Turn off that 1/16 of an inch. Let me recreate the V-carve because it got screwed up. V-carve toolpath. Okay. That's done. Or it'll be done in a second. Come on, we got to say goodbye. We got 3 minutes. So I'm just talking about, instead of doing the whole pattern, right? This is just a single design, right? And this was, I just went and typed in Ornate Lotus, right? All right, so we have our V-carve, which creates this cut here. Okay, so that's our standard V-carve on this flower. Throw our color in there, you can see that color, right? Okay, now I'm going to take my V-carve and I'm going to give it a toolpath color. All right, so a toolpath color, and on that toolpath color, it's going to be maroon, 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 right? So that way we can see that in its color, okay? Now, my pocket cut is going to be on that, hold on a second. My pocket cut is going to be on the outside 1/16 of an inch offset we created of the lotus flower, and the offset a 1/16 of an inch past our profile, our outside profile, that outside shape. We're going to do a pocket cut, and we're cutting it down 3/16 of an inch, so it's just 1/8 of an inch less material removed, more material removed than our actual lotus was. So preview that visible toolpath. What that's going to do is, let it carve that out. What that's going to do is, if I give that a color of black, just as an example, just so you can see. Oops, hold on. That was not the right way to go. We'll go gray. All right, just so you can see here. That gives it kind of a step, like a step. So it's kind of like raised out, so almost three-dimensional. And then we're going to have our final profile cut, which is going to be the inside. The final profile cut is going to be that inside profile. All right, cutting all the way through the material. All right, cutting that part out. Okay, let's turn off the gray. We don't want the gray in there. Turn off the color on the gray. No fill. Okay, and basically, you know, this piece of wall art, it's got a weird shape to it, but you know, hey, I have this lotus flower, and this lotus flower is slightly raised, right? And you know, this outside border, it might on that, you know, it might be a a darker wood, stain or something. Who knows? Whatever the case may be. But you could really just start, when it comes to like wall art, I mean, we're all making signs every day, right? And things like that. But, people buy art. Hell, I go to Walmart and I buy signs for my bathroom, my kitchen, my, things like that, when I have a CNC that I could be making those signs, right? I'll go to Walmart, I'll go to, Costco, not Costco, but IKEA, right? You buy those stupid signs and all that. Wall art, oh, that portrait or that painting was cool. I could sell this, something or another. Who knows? But it could, it could be something, right? It could be nothing. Who knows? But that, no arrays, no patterns, no this or that. It's just a shape with V-carve. Give it a nice, deep kind of look to it. Add some aura mask and paint and all. We took an offset of it, carved it down just a little bit, just to give it a little bit of depth and definition. You can see that definition here, that depth, just to kind of have it stand out some more. We could take that pocket down. I mean, let's take the pocket down even more. Let's double that. Let's go 3/8, 0.375. Calculate. And let's really bring that down. So that, and we'll turn the color off. Almost there. And we'll turn that color off on that. But, so that it really stands out. So it creates a whole nother level of, dimension or what have you. And, with this, soften up the edges, some sanding, soften up the edges to break the sharp corners and stuff, and just give it a nice finished look to it. It would probably look pretty sharp. On this outside profile here, right, I've already removed, bear with me, this is the last thing. I keep saying that, but this is the last thing. I've already removed 3/8 of material here, right? But I'm going to take my profile border here. This is where somebody asked me if you always start on 0. In this case, I would not, right? So I'm going to do a profile cut, and I'm going to start at 3/8, 0.375, because I've already moved that material with that pocket cut. I'm going to use, in my case, I'm going to use my white side 2050 round over bit. My cut depth from that 3/8, I'm starting at 3/8, so it's going down to that level. I'm going to go another quarter, 0.25. I'm going to cut on the outside of the line, but I'm stepping over. Okay, I'm cutting on the outside, but I need to step in the line, so that's a negative number, 1/8 of an inch, 0.125. And I'm going to calculate that toolpath. And what that's going to give me is preview that, select the toolpath, is on my edge here. It's going to give me, let's zoom in to that edge a little, but it's going to give me that nice rounded over edge, right? So on my outside, I get a nice rounded over edge. White side 2050 is an 1/8 inch round over bit, guys. That way my wall art has a nice, outside rounded over edge. My flower is still sharp on its edges, slightly breaking the edges with a, you know, just a light sanding, you know, not too crazy. And, you know, got a pretty cool piece, you know. Size that down, take that sucker right there and size it down about, you know, 20 times its size, because right now it's 24 by 24, but bring it down and you got a pretty cool charm for a necklace, you know. A bolo type tie, you know, drill 2 holes all the way through. It's an inch and a half thick, however thick you want it. Drill 2 holes through it, you know, and do like a bolo tie, and that would be the big thing on the bolo tie for the, you know what I mean, right? All kinds of things that you can do, right? So things to think about, right? And that's it. All right, everybody, I appreciate your time. It's 10:06. We've gone 2 hours and 45 minutes. Hopefully that you can you get something out of that. But yeah, and there you go. So hopefully you learned something from there. Hopefully we picked up something. And we talked about arrays tonight, you know, kilowatt coffee arrays. We talked about patterns and cleaning up and trimming vectors and all that good stuff. A little bit of node editing somewhere in there. Hopefully you got a little tidbit of information. And we went from wall art all the way down to a bolo tie and a pendant for a necklace. Right? So you never know, right? And southwestern skull, right? You know, something like that. Absolutely. And that southwestern Aztec type design work and all that stuff. Yeah, absolutely. For sure. All right, everybody. Until next time, thanks for hanging out with me. Hopefully you picked something up out of it. And we'll see you later. All right. Bye, guys.